Greetings, my fellow dice-sorting goblins. I'm a person who has played a lot of D&D in their life and who also has access to recording software, so I'ma tell y'all the tale of how our Barbarian wound up joining the Tiefling Yakuza. I also have art skills and access to Photoshop, so I'm going to be working on a lovely illustration featuring said Barbar, along with a couple other characters from my current campaign as I regale you with this story. This is an evil campaign, by the by, meaning that everything centers around a party of dysfunctional weirdos who are all evil or chaotic aligned and aren't exactly out adventuring with the ultimate goal of making the world a better place or helping those in need along the way. Those things are all well and good, don't get me wrong, that's just not what these guys are about. Anyway, our story begins deep in the swampy southernmost regions of the Kingdom of Ifalna, where our party, the three of them involved in this tale, Udaroth, the Tiefling Barbarian, Wildfire, the Wood Elf Cleric, and Nub, the Tortle Fighter, all entered the port city of Umbasa, after having narrowly escaped some shenanigans that caused them to become separated from the sorcerer and the wizard. Sirs not appearing in this story are at this point being held against their wills, and Udaroth, Wildfire, and Nub are trying to figure out how best to mount the rescue operation. Granted, Udaroth is totally thinking about all of the ways he really wants to murder the sorcerer because of the things that happened just before the party split, but the other two are down for rescuing both of their companions, so it's time to make with the strategizing. Now, our three problem children have zero connections within Umbasa and know very little about the city outside of the fact that it exists and they are now in it. They simply wound up running for it because it was the closest population center where they might be able to disappear into a crowd for a little while and plan their next move. Thankfully, through gathering information, or whatever we're calling it in 5e, oh no, I'm an old lady who started playing D&D back when gather information was an actual thing you rolled for. Leave me alone. Also, get off my lawn. The three are at least able to learn that, 1, there is a massive market district filled with imported goods from all over the world, major port city, and 2, that there is actually quite a large tiefling community in this city, but they keep largely to the red light district adjacent to the market. Because of info bit number 2, big red horny boy Udaroth isn't really drawing a whole lot of attention from the general public, though many passers-by do try to keep their distance for reasons that will become evident here in a couple of minutes. And so the three make their way to the market district, hoping to find themselves some items or information that maybe have helped them and possibly even some mercenaries that they could hire to help them storm the figurative castle. While they're in the market, Wildfire has the presence of mind to take advantage of the massive bazaar filled with exotic goods from all over the world to look for something rather uncommon in this land. A particular item that he lost in the previous battle and is looking to replace. A spork! Yes, really. Wildfire had found one in an earlier dungeon and thought it was just so neat that he started using it for his holy weapon, which he wound up yeeting at an enemy in desperation during the fight that ultimately led the three of them here. Whereas luck would have it, he does find a merchant that deals in exotic eating utensils, and they do indeed have sporks. The wooden spork is not expensive by any means, it's like a silver piece. But Wildfire and his negatives to all charisma-based skill checks, being the ultra-paranoid forest hobo with a single-digit charisma score that he is, decides he's going to try and haggle the price. This goes about as well as you might imagine and ends with Wildfire grabbing the spork without paying and making a run for it. All while Nub decides that he's going to start knocking things over. I don't remember why exactly this is just how Nub do. Guards, of course, get called, and Udaroth manages to get Nub to leave and places a few gold pieces on the counter for the merchant before cheesing it himself. Digress. Luckily for our three non-heroes, that red light district they had heard about earlier happens to be within sight of their current locations, and a place where the city guard has virtually zero presence. Booyah! As advertised, this red light district is mostly populated by tieflings, so Udaroth at the very least blends in pretty seamlessly here. Even being a good head taller than most of the locals, no one is really paying him any mind. Wildfire and Nub, however, stand out all the more among the tiefling populace, but Wildfire at the very least seems to understand the need to keep a low profile. Nub, however... Oh, Nub. So, tiefling slum or not, this red light district is really no different from any other in that it is packed with all sorts of seedy, illicit types of things that evil adventurers would find appealing, including a variety of bordellos. While searching for an inn to stay at for the night, the three end up passing one such establishment, and Nub, as opposed to being the normal kind of old pervert, decides instead of simply going up to one of the girls and giving them coin in exchange for, services, he needs to take a feather. He has a necklace adorned with feathers, and starts using it to tickle one of the girls. This does not go over well, at all. Nub's refusal to stop results in a very important-looking older tiefling coming out of the building to try and make Nub go away. Nub, of course, ain't having it, and the old man reaches for his sword, and this is the point where Udaroth, who is not usually one of my problem children, steps in and decides he needs to throw a punch at this other tiefling. He crits. The old man gets knocked the fizzity-uck down, and Udaroth and Wildfire manage to pull Nub away from the working girls. Eventually, they do find an inn to stay at, where they find out from the innkeep the reason why the city guard doesn't hang around the red light district. Turns out the entire district is run by one particular tiefling clan who are a very prominent part of an intercontinental crime syndicate known as the Saltfire Kings. And the city government, who receives regular hefty bribes from the Saltfire Kings, have pretty much ordered the city guard to turn a blind eye on this entire section of the city. Meaning, for example, that so long as they keep their activities confined to the red light district, the Saltfire Kings can quite literally get away with murder. Oh. The innkeep was actually quite surprised to learn that Udaroth wasn't one of them. As it turns out, probably a good 98% of the tieflings in Umbasa are either part of the Saltfire Kings or in some way affiliated with them. Hence the locals giving Udaroth such a wide berth when they were walking around town earlier. I would like to point out that this was supposed to just be a background detail that they would have learned by gathering information and listening to rumors. But, as luck would have it, because the click-clack math rocks hate me, it turns out the old man Udaroth punched out wasn't just some grunt or even just some underboss. Oh no, Udaroth punched out none other than the head of the clan himself. While he was just trying to enjoy some leisure time. So, the next morning, Udaroth, deciding he really doesn't need a target on his back on top of everything else they're trying to deal with, figures he should probably try to smooth over this whole punching thing and goes to the innkeep for any insight he might have about the Saltfire Kings or advice for dealing with them. The innkeep, who has heard about the punching incident from a number of patrons at this point, isn't able to give them much information aside from the clan head being a man named Kenneth and the fact that they've already got their thugs out looking for Udaroth. The innkeep is able to offer Udaroth a couple nuggets of advice, however. Like, if he does plan to approach KK, he should probably do so before Kenneth decides to send the frenzied shark, in finger quotes, after him. And that since the Saltfire Kings are a very proper bunch of hardened criminals, it probably wouldn't hurt Udaroth's case any if he cleaned up a bit. You know, take a bath. They did just spend 3 days trekking through a literal swamp, and it definitely shows/smells. And, you know, find some nicer clothes that actually include a shirt. You know, those things barbarians are deathly allergic to. When pressed for clarification about this frenzied shark, however, all the innkeep knew was that they were an especially brutal assassin of the Saltfire Kings that tends to get sent out when they have a particularly elusive or strong target that they would really like to get dead. Taking this advice to heart, Udaroth and Wildfire set out, leaving Nub to sleep the day away. It's for the best, really. The two sneak, as best a barbarian and a cleric can, through the back streets of the Red Light District, and after a while they do manage to make it back into the city proper, where they ended up walking all over town, clothes shopping. I am not actually kidding. These guys spent an entire in-game day trying to find any place outside of the area populated by well-dressed and well-groomed tieflings that actually sold fine clothes that would not only fit a 7-foot-tall barbarian, but also accommodate for horns and a tail. Though, given that they had barely been in town 24 hours, looking and smelling like a couple of murder hobos fresh out the swamp, I suppose it's a miracle that they even managed to find ye old big and tall. Moving on. By early evening, Udaroth and Wildfire make it back to the Red Light District, where the two find a low-rent bathhouse and clean up. Thus far, this is the only time in this entire campaign that Wildfire has used soap. By the time they're done, the proprietor of the bathhouse has, of course, notified their nearest Saltfire street toughs that the dude, that dude they've been looking for all day, was there. So, of course, Udaroth has an escort waiting to take him to Kenneth's estate. Once there, Udaroth is led to a room filled to the brim with a bunch of fancy-looking tifos who all look like they are just waiting for the word to start stabbing. And, of course, he is now face-to-face with Kenneth himself. Basically, Udaroth apologizes, does some ass-kissing, and through a series of charisma checks, manages to get Kenneth to stop wanting him dead. Udaroth even gets the chance to explain the whole situation, what brought them to Umbasa in the first place. Weirdly enough, Kenneth actually kind of takes a liking to the big guy during this whole exchange, and invites him to his study so that they can actually converse without a bunch of stabby boys listening in. Once the two have relocated, Kenneth offers to help with the whole rescue thing, but of course, this aid is not free. We'll get back to that. Udaroth graciously accepts, thinking he's about to get an entire cadre of proven fighters to help them in the coming battle, in exchange for what will probably be some mercenary work later on. Nope. Turns out Kenneth, being a very rational type of person, isn't going to send a bunch of his soldiers into a swamp that is teeming with all sorts of stuff that his largely urban dwelling and occasionally seafaring men aren't going to know how to deal with. Instead, he decides he's just going to assign one person, his best assassin, the Frenzied Shark. A few moments after sending a servant to go and fetch them, a very elegantly dressed purple tiefling woman with one eye and a whole lot of enchanted tattoo on her chest, back, and shoulders enters the study. Clearly none too plussed to be here. The Frenzied Shark, as it turns out, is one of Kenneth's daughters, who he introduces as Morjana. Only moments before she decides to pull a knife on Udaroth. Morjana has zero patience for the yes-men and fancy lads that like to bootlick their way up the ranks within the Saltfire Kings, and what she's seeing in front of her appears to be a very fancy lad, whom she is now being ordered to follow into the filthy, bacteria-riddled, monster-infested swamp. Long and short of it, she straight up refuses to do any such thing, unless Udaroth can defeat her in single combat. Why yes, the rich girl did just challenge the Barbarian to a knife fight. Kenneth straight up refuses to allow any knife-fighting shenanigans to go down in his own home, so Morjana insists instead on a match in the local, very illegal underground fighting pit. With no other options seemingly available to him, and very confident that the worst she could do is to fake her way out of a bad situation. His actual words, Udaroth accepts her challenge. So, the next day, Udaroth, Wildfire, and Nub are all greeted by one of the Saltfires who had been sent to their ends specifically to lead them to the pit, which, as it turns out, they probably never would have found on their own. It is literally underground and accessible only through a hidden stairway located in the back room of an old tea shop. Not big tea drinkers, these three. Udaroth is led to a small prep area by the ring and instructed to strip to the pants, you perverts. Basically, this is an attempt to make this as fair of a fight as possible by removing any armor, weapons that, might do extra damage, or magical items such as a belt of frost giant strength, or potions that might heal you, etc., etc. Glancing across the ring, they can see Morjana, who is just staring down her opponent as what appears to be a handful of fangirls are helping her to get ready. Aside from a chest wrap, she is every bit as exposed as Udaroth, and plot twist! Turns out she appears to be every bit as muscle and glorious hair as Udaroth, too. Lady is shredded. Nub, being Nub, catches a single glimpse of Morjana as the two are instructed to enter the ring, and is immediately smitten. So much so that he decides he needs to drop a lot of gold betting against Udaroth in this fight. In any case, after all the bets have been placed, a gong sounds. Ready? Fight! Morjana, having rolled a much higher initiative, is on Udaroth before the gonging has even cleared the air. The two are stabbing at each other while dodging knife jabs. Morjana is clearly more practiced with the small weapon than the typically axe and sword wielding Udaroth is, but he is doing a pretty good job in dodging her attacks. He's still walking away with a couple new scars, but he's even gotten a couple good swipes in himself so far. After a good long while of this, Morjana grows impatient and opts to throw her knife right at Udaroth's smug face. It misses by a lot. However, Udaroth hadn't even finished exclaiming, "Ha!" in smug satisfaction before two incredibly hard punches, followed by two more, all landed square on his stomach, chest, and jaw. Secondary plot twist! Turns out Morjana is stated as a monk, meaning she knows Kung Fu and hits a lot harder unarmed and can also attack multiple times per turn. Oh. Udaroth continues to swing his knife wildly at Morjana, but can't seem to hit her for the life of him, and ultimately ends up throwing his knife as well. She deflects it with minimal effort, but ha-ha! It was a distraction anyways. Udaroth uses the opportunity to attempt to grapple her, and fails. Morsh crits on one of her attacks and instead grabs Udaroth by his horns, pulling his head down low enough that she can knee him in the face, breaking his nose in the process. Udaroth is getting pretty angry at this point, but is also stunned for a round, and somewhere in the crowd, Nub can be heard shouting, "Take a dive!" That is exactly how he talks. As he clutches at his profusely bleeding nasal cavities, Morjana ends up getting behind Udaroth, grabs him by the hair, and proceeds to unleash a flurry of kidney punches. Now, quick side note about Udaroth. This man loves his hair. Despite being a barbar, he puts a lot of time and effort into caring for his very majestic hair. It may stem from hair being kind of a big thing with the tribe he grew up in, but needless to say, effing with the hair was the last straw. You know what time it is? Time for some of the world-famous Barbarian rage! While raging, Udaroth finally manages to land a hit on Morjana, getting her to let go of his hair and swatting her away from him. Morj runs back in and attempts a kick at Udaroth's still bleeding face. It hits, but he also finally manages to succeed on a grapple check and additionally crits his next attack roll. You know that puny god scene in the first Avengers film with Loki and the Hulk? Yeah, that's pretty much exactly what ended up happening here. Udaroth grabs Morjana by the leg and smashes her into the ground over and over again in exactly that manner, knocking her far beyond 0 hit points in the process and winning the fight. Mechanically speaking, Lady walked away from being a humanoid flail whose favorite enemy was the ground itself, thanks in no small part to the nigh-invincible armor one gets for being a plot-critical NPC. Nub, upset both that his waifu was defeated and that he lost a lot of coin as a result, starts a riot, like you do, and Wildfire, being Wildfire, assists in this endeavor by setting the bookie's counter on fire. You know, like a sane person. Fast forward to later that evening, back at Kenneth's estate. Udaroth calmed down and nose healed via magic, along with Wildfire and Nub are sitting out in a rather pleasant little courtyard area, trying their hardest not to overhear whatever argument KK and Morjana are very loudly having indoors. After a while, the yelling dies down and the fully magically healed Morjana joins the three out in the courtyard, where she approaches Udaroth and once again draws her knife. Udaroth moves to draw his own weapon, annoyed and exasperated, but nonetheless ready to throw down again. But he stops as Morj raises the knife to the back of her own head and proceeds to slice off her hip-length braid, leaving her with some very short hair. Turns out, hair is also a big deal to her clan, as she explains that all the warriors traditionally wore theirs in braids, the length being symbolic of how long one had gone undefeated, a very long streak which Udaroth had just broken. You know, warrior culture stuff. After this exchange and a bit of Nub trying and failing to get Senpai to notice him, Morjana is brought up to speed and the four begin planning their attack. I'm just going to completely gloss over the whole rescue operation part, because that is a whole other basket of puppies that I will be getting into next time in a sort of B-side / part 2 to this story, where I tell you all about what the wizard and sorcerer were getting up to. But, for the sake of this already long-winded tale, Udaroth, Wildfire, Nub, and Morjana do successfully retrieve Sirs not appearing in this story and return with them to Umbasa. This is the point where Kenneth is expecting payment in exchange for not killing Udaroth and loaning him his best assassin. Udaroth is more than prepared to pony up some gold or do some murking or some other sort of favor. Nope. Turns out the price was actually much steeper than any of that. Udaroth now has to join the Saltfire Kings. Oddly enough, Udaroth is actually pretty okay with this and doesn't even try to resist, and why would he, really? Taking odd jobs from whomever, doing whatever, doesn't pay nearly as well as being a made man. Big Guy is officially inducted into the Saltfire Kings and even gets a snazzy enchanted back, shoulder, and chest-spanning tattoo of his very own. Wildfire, Nub, and Sirs not appearing in this story are even offered some smaller enchanted ink of their own for reasons that branch off into a completely different tale. Maybe I'll tell you sometime. But Nub and Wildfire are the only two who actually accept. No, Nub did not ever get Muscle Waifu Senpai to notice him. In fact, his poor little reptilian heart wound up getting broken into a million billion tiny pieces. We'll get a little more into that next time. But that, my dearest goblins, is how the Barbarian wound up joining the Tiefling Yakuza. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear part 2, That Time the Goblin Became a Phylactery, subscribe so you don't miss it. And that's all I've got for you. Later.